The reason my father's family finally cast my stepmother out was because, after years of marriage, she remained unable to conceive a child. Everyone in our small village said it was her karma, a just punishment for some unknown sin. But I remember a different story. I remember being 6 years old, burning with a fever so high the world felt like a dream. And I remember her, Lena, pulling me on a small handcart through the heart of a blizzard just to get me to a hospital. My own story began with loss. When I was 5, my biological mother hanged herself. It wasn't long after her death that my grandmother sat my father down for a serious talk. "You're just going to have to settle, Mark," she said with a heavy sigh. "What young, single girl is going to want to marry a man like you, with a child to raise? The family can't afford another big, proper wedding." My father, Mark, was a handsome man, and at that moment, he was slicking gel into his dark hair, admiring his own reflection in the mirror. He just smiled. "Who wants damaged goods? You just wait and see," he said, full of confidence. True to his word, he brought a young woman home not long after. She had a kind, round face, dark, curious eyes, and a thick, dark braid that fell down her back. She looked around our small, grim house with a mix of shyness and curiosity, and when she saw me, she waved. "Hey there, little girl," she said, her voice soft. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice small, before turning and running away. I fled to the kitchen, where I found my grandmother stirring a pot over the stove. I heard her asking my father in a hushed, urgent voice, "Does she know?" My dad just waved a dismissive hand. "No, I told her Alara is my sister's daughter. Don't you dare let it slip." My grandmother frowned, her brow furrowed with worry. "In a town this small, Mark, everyone knows everyone else's business. How long do you possibly think you can keep a secret like that?" My father casually picked up a piece of cooked beef from the cutting board, tossed it into his mouth, and smiled with unwavering confidence. "Once it's a done deal, you think she's going to just pack up and fly away?" My grandmother nodded slowly, seemingly convinced. "She's got no shame, running off with you without even telling her parents. She's got whatever is coming to her." My father's expression was smug. "It just means your son has skills. I got a young wife without having to spend a single dime. Just you wait, she'll give you 3 healthy grandsons." The wedding between my father and Lena was a slapdash, hurried affair. Behind her back, my grandmother pulled me aside. "Elara," she whispered, "don't you ever be like Lena. When your dad was courting your mother, back when he was 20, we had a proper wedding with all the traditions. Did we skimp on a single thing?" "No, but look at Lena. Your dad sweet-talked her. She ran off with him behind her parents' backs, and she got absolutely nothing for it. Even the furniture in their room is secondhand, left over from the last wife." She hugged me tightly. "You remember this, Alara. A man's words are nothing but lies." I couldn't help but think about what my friend Chloe had told me earlier that day. "My mom says a kid without a mom is like a weed, but a kid with a mom is a treasure," she had announced. She pointed at the ground where I stood. "You're the weed." Then she pointed proudly at herself. "I'm the treasure." Chloe's mother, standing nearby, pulled her daughter into a warm hug and peppered her face with kisses, smiling widely. Then she looked at me. "Alara, have you ever heard the saying? A stepmom will turn your dad against you, and there's nothing more wicked than a stepmother's heart." Thinking about all of that made me shiver with a cold dread. That night, in my dreams, Lena's pretty round face twisted and warped until it became a monstrous green thing that haunted my sleep. After the wedding, Lena was actually quite nice to me, which only confused me more. My dad bought a bright yellow sponge cake, ostensibly for her to build up her nutrition, but she immediately waved me over. "Alara, come here," she said warmly. My father quickly intervened, shooing me away. "Alara, go see your grandma." He then turned back to Lena, his tone softening. "There are only a few pieces left. You should eat them." Lena shot him a sharp look. "What kind of uncle are you? Even if you want to spoil your wife, you can't treat a child like that." She carefully pressed a piece of the sweet cake into my hand, speaking to me in a soft, gentle voice. "Eat slowly. Your auntie has plenty more." She was happy, believing my father was being stingy with me because he cared so much about her. She had no idea that wasn't it at all. Later, I overheard my grandmother grumbling to my dad in private. "Why do you keep giving all the meat to Lena? I don't even give that much to Ilara. I save it all for you." My dad replied without a hint of shame. "Isn't it so she'll finally give you a grandson? Once the baby comes, we'll have her working like a dog for the rest of her life." He wiped the grease from his mouth with the back of his hand and smiled. That's how women are. Who really treats them like treasure? Winter arrived and the world outside froze over. It was then that I came down with a terrifyingly high fever. I couldn't stop shaking, my body racked with chills. Lena held me constantly, tirelessly changing the cold, damp towel on my forehead and pressing her own forehead against mine to check my temperature. In my feverish days, I kept crying out for my real mother, calling "Mommy, Mommy," over and over. A single teardrop fell from Lena's eye and landed on my face. "Hang in there, sweetie," she whispered. "We'll get you to the hospital right away." Her suggestion was met with immediate and firm opposition from the entire family. My grandpa was the first to speak. "I don't have any money, and even if I did, I wouldn't waste it on a hospital." My grandma, for her part, burned some of last year's holiday decorations to ash, mixed the black powder into a bowl of murky water, and muttered, "Drink this and you'll be fine. It's an old folk remedy that always works." My dad just shrugged. "Let's just wait and see. How are we supposed to get there in a blizzard like this anyway? We can't." Lena stared at my dad for a long, silent moment, then began to pace anxiously around the room. Without another word, she threw on a raincoat and rushed out into the storm. A few minutes later, she returned, pulling a flatbed cart behind her. "Mom," she shouted, her voice filled with urgency, "bring out some more blankets. We need to wrap Ilara up tight." When my grandma just stood there, staring blankly, Lena stomped her foot in frustration. "If this fever keeps up, even if she pulls through, she could end up with brain damage. It could ruin her whole life." She turned to my father, her eyes pleading. "Mark, say something. If anything happens to Ilara, what are we going to tell your sister?" She was on the verge of tears. "Mark, you're her uncle." Seeing that my dad still wasn't moving, she gave up on him. She dropped the cart, wrapped me in a thick quilt, and struggled to lift my limp body onto it. Frantically, she threw another heavy quilt over me, then grabbed the handles and tried to pull. She couldn't move it an inch. My grandpa was holding it back from behind. "Mark, help me, please," she yelled. My grandma finally started crying too. "Let's just take her to the hospital. If it's too expensive, we can always bring her back." My grandpa stammered, "It's not just about the money. They're getting stricter now. If she were to pass, she wouldn't be in the way of you having a son." Lena was confused. "Ilara's not our child. What does that have to do with anything?" It was then that my dad finally spoke, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Lena, Ilara is my daughter, from my first wife." Lena froze, looking completely deflated, as if all the air had been knocked out of her. Her grip on the cart handles loosened, and one end tipped up, nearly sending me tumbling onto the cold ground. In that moment of chaos, my grandma suddenly fell to her knees. "Lena, I can see you're a good person. I've raised Ilara since she was a baby. I can't bear to lose her. I'll go to the hospital with you." But Lena, snapping back to reality, let out a pained, wounded cry and ran off into the swirling blizzard. My grandpa quickly pulled the cart back to return it to our neighbor. My grandma, old and frail as she was, managed to get me onto her back. She didn't know the way to the hospital, but she started walking toward town anyway, stumbling with every heavy step. The snow fell harder and harder until everything was a sea of white. On my grandma's back, I could hear her wheezing, struggling for every breath. Suddenly, she slipped, and we both tumbled into a small, snow-filled ditch by the river. Then, through the snow, I saw that familiar round face again. Lena had come back. She reached down, pulled me up with a grunt of effort, and hoisted me onto her own back. My grandma followed behind us, thanking her over and over again. Lena didn't say a single word the whole way. She carried me all the way to the hospital. Once there, she took the silver bracelet from her wrist and exchanged it for cash with the clerk at the front window to pay for my admission. By my hospital bed, my grandma knelt before her again. "Lena, from now on, I'll serve you like you're my own mother-in-law. Please, I'm begging you, don't get a divorce." Lena had been determined to leave, but when I woke up and stared at her with my big, feverish eyes, she hesitated. She remembered all the times she had held me and told me stories. The time I had climbed a tree to pick fruit and saved it for her instead of eating it myself. And the time my own grandfather was willing to let me die just so he could have a grandson. In that moment, her heart softened. That one moment of weakness ended up costing her half her life. She didn't divorce my dad, and from that day forward, she became known throughout the area as the wicked stepmother. Since she was staying, Lena told me to call her mom, saying that I was her daughter from now on. At the dinner table, Lena would force me to eat meat. I couldn't stomach it and would whine, "It's too greasy." My grandma would take the meat from my plate with a look of pity and pass it to my father, saying, "Alara's like me. She likes pickles and dried radishes. She's not a picky eater." But Lena would block my dad's chopsticks as he reached for the last piece of meat. "No, she has to eat it, even if she doesn't want to. Ilara's too thin, too small. That kid Mason always pulls her braids because he knows he can pick on her." She would stare at me intently until I forced the greasy meat down my throat. When our neighbor got a goat, Lena brought over a bowl of fresh milk. She boiled it, let it cool, and told me to drink it. I cried as I drank it, overwhelmed by how gamey it tasted. The neighbor's wife came by for a visit and saw me crying. She immediately spread the story all over the village, but with her own malicious twist. That Lena won't let the poor kid eat meat, and the poor thing is just crying her eyes out from hunger. My grandpa was still worried that I would get in the way of him having a grandson, so he came up with a cruel plan. "We can spend a little money to get Alara a disability certificate, say she's mentally challenged." My grandma disagreed. "If that gets out, how will Alara ever get married?" My grandpa had another idea. "Then we'll have her pretend to be deaf and mute. We'll say the high fever and the wrong medicine at the hospital caused it. Isn't there a kid like that in the next village? When it's time for her to get married, we'll just say she got better, that she can hear and speak again. Who would complain then?" No sooner said than done, he dragged me to the village doctor, Dr. Chen, that very same day. Dr. Chen looked me over and said coolly, "This child looks perfectly fine to me. There's nothing wrong with her." He went back to his writing. My grandpa quietly slipped him some cash in an envelope, smiling apologetically. "Just do your old uncle a favor. When she gets a little brother, we'll have you over to celebrate." He then crouched down and pretended to talk into my ear. I knew my part and acted like I couldn't hear him. Dr. Chen put down his pen, picked up the envelope, and fiddled with it for a moment. Then he suddenly asked me, "What's 3 plus 5? I was really into learning math at the time. I completely forgot what my grandpa had told me to do and blurted out, 8! My grandpa backhanded me across the face with all his strength. I stumbled and fell, breaking my front tooth on the hard floor. My mouth filled with the coppery taste of blood, and tears streamed down my face from the sharp pain. He roared at me, "Look at you, so smart, so clever." Grandpa angrily snatched the money back from the doctor, glared at Dr. Chen, and left me there on the floor as he stormed home. Dr. Chen walked me home, and on the way we ran into Lena, who had been out looking for me. When Lena asked what had happened, Dr. Chen sneered at her. "The government's rules aren't that strict. You're allowed to have your own kid. Stop tormenting Alara or you'll get what's coming to you." Being scolded so harshly out of the blue, Lena's face went pale. She just stood there, watching Dr. Chen walk away coldly. I sobbed. "I'm gap-toothed now." Lena knelt down and gently wiped my tear-streaked face with her handkerchief. "It's okay. It's okay. Your adult teeth will grow in." My 2 front teeth were broken, but my grandpa, worried about his own pride, twisted the story and blamed the entire incident on Lena. Lena spent her days working in the fields or knitting sweaters at home to earn extra money. She rarely socialized or gossiped with the other women, so she was completely unaware of the slander being thrown at her. She knitted sweaters mainly for me. Since we all lived together, my grandpa controlled all the money from the crops, and he was a total cheapskate who never spent a penny if he could avoid it. Lena was skilled with her hands and knitted to earn a little extra, using it to pay my school fees, buy notebooks and pencils, and even give me 30 or 50 cents for snacks every day. My grandma would say, "Just fill a small flask with sugar water for her? What's the point of giving her money?" But Lena would reply, "I don't want her to have to watch the other kids eat snacks while she has nothing. They'll look down on her." She was more serious about my studies than anyone. I wasn't allowed to watch TV until my homework was done. And when it was, she would take my workbook and check it carefully, page by page. My dad would rush her. "What's there to check? It doesn't matter if she does it or not. My mom is cooking the pig feed. Can't you go help her?" He was such a famous mama's boy, always worried about his mother's workload, but never lifting a finger to help himself. Lena ignored him completely and only gave me back the workbook after she was finished checking it. One day, Lena went into town to buy some things. With no one supervising me, I watched TV until 8 o'clock. When Lena got back, she was furious. My dad took the opportunity to make a snide comment. "You really think you're going to raise a valedictorian and live off her success? You'd be better off trying a little harder to get pregnant. Having a son is what really matters." He waved me away, but Lena said, "Stay right there. You're not sleeping until you finish your homework." She turned on the desk lamp and sat beside me, continuing her knitting. I'd barely written 2 lines before I burst into tears. "It's already 8 o'clock. I'll never finish." Lena got up, soaked a towel in hot water, and gently wiped my tear-streaked face. "Go on, write," she said softly. "I'll stay with you. By the time the little hand on the clock goes around one more time, you'll be done." I wrote and wrote until it was all finished, and only then did Lena let me go to bed. My grandpa already had a grudge against Lena for not giving him a grandson. When he complained about her to others, he'd add that Lena wouldn't even let his granddaughter sleep, making the child stay up all night to work for her. I got first place on my final exams. When the principal announced my name on stage during the school assembly, Lena, who was in the audience, was so happy she nearly jumped out of her seat. I saw it all from the auditorium window, and my heart swelled with pride. But when I got home from school, I saw my maternal grandfather, who hadn't visited in a long time, confronting Lena, his spit flying in her face as he yelled, "What is wrong with you? Ilara gets first place. You go to the parent-teacher conference, and when someone asks if she's your daughter, you say, 'Her? Ugh, what daughter? That little jinx.'" My grandfather pulled me in front of her, his voice full of hatred. "She's only 8 years old. How could you wish death on her?" I burst into tears, terrified and completely confused. A crowd of onlookers had gathered. Lena's face was beet red as she swore she never said such a thing. My grandfather pointed to Chloe's mom in the crowd and shouted, "This kind lady here told me herself. I ran into her at the edge of the village just now." It all clicked. Chloe's mom was jealous that I had outshone her daughter in school. I lunged at her, wanting to hit her. "You're lying!" The color drained from Lena's face. She had just taught Chloe's mom a new, complicated knitting pattern to help her earn extra money, only to be stabbed in the back like this. She grabbed me and pulled me into a tight, protective hug. My grandfather was still yelling and looked like he was about to hit Lena. I didn't understand why any of this was happening and just wailed into her shoulder. The wicked stepmother held me close, her own tears dripping onto my neck. My grandfather was stunned to see how close Lena and I were. The scene seemed to make him uncomfortable. He had only come to see me on a whim, and after that day, he never came back. From that day on, Lena truly understood how hard it was to be a stepmother. Everyone misunderstands you. No one believes you wouldn't abuse a child that isn't biologically yours. Life in the countryside was boring and repetitive. No one wanted to hear stories about a stepmother loving her child. What people loved to pass around were stories of stepmothers who abused their kids, who starved them, who beat them until their teeth broke. They would savor these sensational, tragic tales, sigh with false pity, and feel a little better about their own messy lives. Their own chaotic families seemed a bit more perfect in comparison. The old women who were just scolding their daughters-in-law a moment before would see the gossipy looks from others and immediately say, "Well, at least we don't have a cruel stepmother in our family." It was just Lena's bad luck that there were very few stepmothers in the entire county those years. Seeing that Chloe couldn't catch up to me in school, her mom transferred her to the elementary school in town, bragging to anyone who would listen. This is my own flesh and blood. You think someone like Lena would ever spend that kind of money on a stepdaughter? Lena told me. The teachers at the village school are very responsible. We're not transferring. I nodded in agreement. Chloe boasted to me about her new school. We have uniforms. If you don't wear one, you're not allowed in. She saw Lena making me a stool and pursed her lips. Aunt Lena, we don't even have to bring stools for exams at my school. The classrooms are huge. Our little village school had limited resources. The desks were old and 2 students shared a long bench. For final exams, students took turns bringing in large stools from home. Half the class would lean over the stools to take the test, which served to separate the seats and prevent cheating. My grandpa found an old worm-eaten stool from somewhere in the house and said, "Just take this." But Lena quietly borrowed tools from our neighbor, who was a carpenter, chopped down a poplar tree behind our house, and spent 2 whole weeks making me a brand new stool. She delivered it to the school herself. She always said the same thing. Whatever the other kids have, Ilara should have too. Chloe's mom took every opportunity she could to be nasty. One day, she asked me to my face, "Do you remember how your real mom died?" A woman standing next to her perked up. "Drank pesticide, hanged herself, or jumped in the river?" she asked eagerly. She sighed. "I moved here too late to know." She sounded as if my mother's suicide was a spectacular show she was sorry to have missed. I glared at Chloe's mom. Her eyes darted around and she spoke again in a conspiratorial whisper. You little brat. You really think Lena treats you like a treasure? The second she has a son of her own, you'll be nothing to her." I shot back. "That's none of your business, you gossip." Chloe's mom jumped up in anger, then a wicked, triumphant smile spread across her face. "I'll tell you what. Your mom hanged herself because your dad was having an affair." "Humph. And who do you think that woman was?" "You're so close to her now. You're a heartless little thing, aren't you?" I froze. Could it be true? That Lena was the reason my mother, whose face I could barely remember, but who had given me life, was dead? By the time I started middle school, Lena and my dad had been married for years, but she had never gotten pregnant. My grandpa picked fights with her constantly, once saying to her face, "You're just dead weight, completely useless." Around that time, my dad met a man named Mr. Henderson and went into business with him. To everyone's surprise, he actually got rich. My grandpa, shedding his cheapskate image, invested all his money in my dad's new business. He started acting like the lord of the manor, looking down his nose at everyone. The only time his confidence deflated was when people mentioned that he still didn't have a grandson. His face and shoulders would just sag. He made up his mind and paid for a distant relative to come visit. She was a plump auntie who was divorced and had a son. When this woman arrived, she was all over my grandpa, calling him uncle and sweet-talking him until he was grinning from ear to ear. Sometimes, after a meal, the woman would sit by the door, picking her teeth and chatting with my grandpa. "The way I see it," she'd say, "a woman who can't have a son isn't a real woman at all." Lena wouldn't lower herself to argue with her and just ignored her. So, I would secretly smear dishwater on the bottom of the woman's bowl or mix tiny pebbles into her rice to get revenge for Lena. One day, while Lena was out, my grandpa and that woman got my dad drunk and half carried, half pushed him into the bedroom. Then my grandpa sat by the door to make sure I didn't cause any trouble. The window was too high for me to reach. I looked around the house and found an old, broken piece of a gong. Clang, clang, clang! I started banging it and parading around the doorway. My grandpa tried to chase me, but he couldn't catch me and ended up tripping and falling. He screamed in frustration, which only made me bang louder. It was dinner time, and the neighbors, thinking something was wrong, came over with their bowls in hand to see what all the commotion was about. I dropped the piece of gong and pushed hard on the bedroom door. The woman inside screeched in a grating voice, "What are you pushing for, you little brat?" It was my dad in Lena's room. The crowd of onlookers instantly understood what was happening, and some of them laughed so hard they spat out their food. A tall young man reached up and pushed the window open. The woman came out a moment later, her face bright red with shame. When Lena got home and heard what had happened, she called me a sly little devil. She laughed, but then her expression turned grim. I asked her, "Why don't you leave? I'm grown up now. You don't have to worry about me anymore." She gave a sad smile. "And go where? I ran away from an arranged marriage to come here in the first place. When a woman is out there alone, every man either wants to take advantage of you or stomp you down. I don't want to go back to that life, drifting around. It's too hard." My grandma fell ill and never recovered. On her deathbed, she said to Lena, "I was an orphan. These silver earrings are the only thing my mother ever gave me. I was going to be buried with them, but Lena, I want you to have them. Please don't think they're too shabby." Lena shook her head and gently put the earrings back in my grandma's ears. "You wear them. With or without them, I'll always be good to the child." At my grandma's funeral, a rich, arrogant man grabbed my arm and tried to pull me into his lap, laughing to my dad. "Your little girl is turning into quite the looker." I struggled, but I couldn't get away, and my face turned red with shame. My dad just chuckled, "Heh heh," and deliberately looked away. "Come on, Mr. Henderson, let's drink up. Here's to making us all rich." The man, Henderson, ran his hand down my back to my waist, gave it a hard squeeze, and started moving lower. Lena suddenly appeared and yanked me away from him. But he, emboldened by the alcohol, stood up and wrapped his arms around me again, pressing his face against mine with a sleazy grin. Someone in the crowd said, "Your wife can't take a joke." Someone else tried to smooth things over. "Mr. Henderson is just playing with the kid." My dad stood up and pulled at Lena. "What are you doing? Go fry up a couple more dishes." Lena couldn't pry Henderson's hands off me. In a panic, she grabbed a bowl of steaming hot tofu soup from the table and poured it all over his head. Henderson howled like a stuck pig. My dad, without a moment's hesitation, slapped Lena hard across the face, right then and there. My dad filed for divorce. The truth was, as soon as he started making money with Henderson, he started playing around with other women. The one he was currently seeing had gotten pregnant in a hurry, and through some means was certain it was a boy. According to my dad and grandpa, Lena wasn't going to get a single penny of the family's money. I helped Lena fight them tooth and nail. I told them, "I know about that last batch of pesticides you bought, Dad. They were all fake. And you're planning on buying an even cheaper fake batch soon. And Grandpa, I know you often go to see Mrs. Miller when her husband isn't home." I rattled off one dirty secret after another. My dad and Grandpa just stood there, their mouths agape, completely speechless. They had always pretended to be respectable men, and now I had exposed their filthiest secrets to the light of day. My grandpa finally snapped out of it and raised his hand to hit me, but Lena was faster, swinging a stick and cracking it against him first. "Don't you touch her, you old bastard!" Maybe my craziness was contagious because Lena started screaming curses too, things so foul they made my head spin. After our huge blow-up, my dad, furious, picked up a chair and smashed it in the doorway, shattering it to pieces. By then, villagers were starting to wander over to see the spectacle. Faced with two living, breathing shrews in broad daylight that they couldn't just make disappear, and with my grandpa desperate for a grandson and my dad obsessed with his reputation, they had no choice but to give in and give Lena a fair settlement. I helped Lena pack her things and finally told her what Chloe's mom had said all those years ago about her being the cause of my mother's death. Lena's expression was complicated. "I thought you didn't know about that rumor." My God, she had known about the lies people were spreading about her all this time and had never said a single word. "The foolish woman." Lena explained, "Alara, it was only after your mom died that a friend from my hometown introduced me to your dad where we were both working. I found out later that your dad had agreed to forget a debt the guy owed him in exchange for the introduction." She gave a sad, resigned smile. "Alara, I have to go now. It'll be hard out there, but I have to try, even if I have nothing." Seeing the worry in my eyes, she put on a cheerful face. "I'm not a little girl anymore. I've been in arguments. I've been in fights. If I go out on my own now, maybe I'll be the one pushing other people around." I wrapped my arms around her neck and hugged her tight. "Mom, I want to be a shrew when I grow up too." She let out a small chuckle. This stepmom really hasn't taught her kid well. After kicking Lena out, my grandpa finally got his grandson. He was ecstatic, his face glowing with a triumphant joy. He hadn't forgotten what had happened with Dr. Chen years ago. Dressed in a new leather coat with a fur collar and with an expensive cigarette dangling from his lips, he went to give Dr. Chen the celebratory red eggs. He was very grand about it, giving him a whole basketful, declaring that only the best was good enough for his golden grandson. He saw that Dr. Chen was still wearing a shabby, old-fashioned jacket. He smiled, unzipped his new leather coat, and put his hands on his hips, declaring generously, "Dr. Chen, you should come to the baby's 1-month party. I'll have my son get you a leather coat. You know what they say, clothes make the man." Dr. Chen, ever composed, accepted the eggs and, as was custom, took $20 from his drawer to give to my grandpa. My grandpa waved it away. "No, no, keep it. You can have that little bit of money. Poor you. Stuck with that dead-end salary." His face beamed. "Seriously, you should see my grandson. He's just perfect." Dr. Chen studied my grandpa's face for a long time without speaking. Then he said quietly, "Sir, you should probably go to a major hospital and get a checkup." My grandpa stormed off in a huff. What was wrong with that guy? A poor, pathetic man cursing people. He refused to believe he was sick. That night, he went home and ate big mouthfuls of meat and drank big bowls of wine. But sickness comes like a landslide. You can't just wish it away. My dad, the famous filial son, rushed his old man to the hospital and lavishly arranged for the best private room. But the doctors in town said they couldn't treat his illness. After some delay, my grandpa quickly withered away until he looked like a skeleton. Dad hired a van to take Grandpa to the provincial capital. The cost of treatment the doctors there quoted sounded like an astronomical figure to him, like that they were robbing him blind. The little van brought my grandpa back home. As it was about to leave, my grandpa clung to the door, refusing to let go, desperately trying to climb back in. It was as if he believed that if he could just get back in the van, there would still be hope for a cure. In the end, he was confined to his bed at home, gripped by the terror of death. Hearing the old man didn't have long to live, the mistress kindly brought the grandson to his bedside, but he just turned his head away in annoyance. The mistress stomped off with the child in a huff. It was raining and cold on the day of Grandpa's funeral. The burial ground was in a low-lying area and had flooded. They trampled down the reeds so the son and grandson could kneel and bow their heads on the muddy ground. The grandson was just learning to walk. His mother held him steady with one hand and carried an oil lamp for him with the other. Someone said, "My uncle was a lucky man, having a grandson to carry the lamp for him at the end." My aunt and I, dressed in white mourning clothes, stood at a distance under an umbrella. My aunt suddenly said, "You know, when you were born, Grandpa was really good to you. It had been years since there was a baby in the house. Every day after work, he'd rush home, pick you up from the cradle, and tickle you with his beard. You cried all night, wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. You got thinner every day. He posted signs on the road with folk prayers, but it didn't work. Someone told him an old goat's beard would help, so he spent 3 days searching the entire county to find one. He'd just gotten home when he heard from a fortune teller that releasing a catfish would work, so without even a sip of water, he went out again to find one. It was that day he got into an argument with some men over something. Their 2 sons were built like brick houses, and they just started swinging without a word. Beat your grandpa so bad, he couldn't get out of bed for 3 days. Later, when they heard about the one-child policy, Grandpa started muttering all the time, "What will we do without a grandson? We have to have a grandson." And gradually, he stopped liking you. I looked at the new grave. The black ashes of the burnt paper money were scattered by the wind like black butterflies, quickly dampened by the rain and falling to the ground. The sharp wailing sound of the funeral horn started up again. By the time I got into high school, Chloe had been out of school for a long time. After transferring to the school in town, the long commute had become too much for her. She started faking sickness, first for a week, then for a month, and then she just never went back. Chloe's mom got addicted to mahjong and never really cared about her daughter's education. Chloe's dad's business failed, leaving him deep in debt. He told her, "You have to come work with me. The creditors are getting aggressive." Chloe's mom said, "I'm not healthy. How can I go out and work? You take Chloe with you." And so, at 16, Chloe went off to work. Lena came to see me at school one afternoon. She passed me a container of braised pork she'd made through the school gate. "I opened a small shop nearby," she said, smiling. "I can come see you often now." The next time she came, I brought a chicken leg from the school cafeteria for us to share. The old security guard saw us talking through the gate, waved Lena into his little booth, and we finally got to eat a proper meal together at his small square table. The school principal saw us and frowned. "Why are you letting parents in so casually?" he demanded. He asked me sternly, "What class are you in? Don't you know the school rules?" The old guard bowed and wrung his hands, smiling apologetically. "This is my daughter and granddaughter. My daughter came to see me." "Oh," the principal said, a little skeptical, but he walked away. My fake grandpa waved his hand. "It's fine, keep eating. You can come in next time you visit the kid." His voice dropped. "My daughter? She has a hard time seeing her kid, too. It breaks my heart watching you two every time, crying through the gate." Lena opened her own tailor shop. She also took the train to other cities to buy clothes and shoes wholesale to sell. She was warm and generous. Her products were good quality and her prices were fair. Business got better and better every day, and she even hired an assistant named Sarah. Meanwhile, my dad's business, built on fake and shoddy goods, was found out by the villagers. People would rather take a long bus ride to the city to buy what they needed. His easy money started drying up. Someone praised Lena's success in front of him, and he couldn't stand it. He hired a young man with an iron pipe to wait for Lena on her way home one night. Lena was scared to death, but there was no way to avoid it. The road was deserted. Should she just run him over? She didn't want to go to jail. She told her young apprentice, Sarah, to hide in the back of the van while she got out. The person holding the iron pipe was a skinny, baby-faced boy. It was clearly his first time doing something like this, and his hands were shaking. Suddenly, Sarah let out a scream, charged out of the van, and started beating the boy senseless. It turned out the boy was her ex-boyfriend. When Lena had taken Sarah in, she had just had an abortion at a back alley clinic. The procedure was botched. They'd scraped her uterus and hadn't cleaned it out properly. Sarah almost died. She had collapsed on Lena's doorstep, and Lena had taken her to the hospital, then let her stay and recover. Once she was better, Sarah begged Lena to let her stay, and Lena paid her a monthly salary. Sarah's parents had kicked her out to work when she was just a teenager, only caring whether her monthly payments arrived on time. The boy had been nice to her, and before she knew it, she was pregnant. When he heard the news, he got scared and ran off the same day. She went home with a big belly, but her parents were just ashamed of her. They shut the door in her face and didn't care if she lived or died. The boy eventually had a change of heart and came looking for her, but he'd run out of money and was desperate enough to become a hired thug, nearly going down a dark path. I told Lena, "Mom, it's a good thing you did a good deed." Lena sighed. For a woman, one wrong step can either get you killed or land you in the worst kind of place, with no chance of ever getting back on your feet. She looked at the book in my hand and sighed again. "Alara, you're educated. You'll be able to support yourself. You're different from us. Thank God you're different from us." I looked up at Sarah's happy, busy figure, humming a song as she cut fabric. I quietly told Lena a line from the book I was reading. "We're all women. We share the same fate." After my dad hired the hitman, Lena had said, "Your father is so full of himself with his money now. He thinks he's above the law. If he keeps this up, he's going to get into serious trouble." Her words became a prophecy. My dad and his mistress never got married, and she was always fighting with him. She wasn't a very worldly woman, and when she got angry, she'd say anything. She'd tell him, "It's not like I have to stay with you, you know." She didn't know how deeply suspicious and possessive my dad was. On top of that, people in the village would say, "How come he couldn't have a kid for so many years and then suddenly he has one?" Others would say about the mistress, "She's always been a loose woman. How could she ever be faithful?" My dad fooled around with women all the time, but he could never tolerate the thought of being cheated on. He always came home unannounced to try and catch his mistress off guard. One day, he actually did. A man with a round face and big ears, who looked just like his son, was holding the boy in his arms, playing with him. My dad demanded, "Who are you?" His tone was so aggressive that the man, still holding the child, started to walk away without a word. When my dad kicked Lena out years ago, he had smashed a chair. One of the chair legs had been lying by the wall ever since. He picked it up and swung it at the man. Just one swing. A nail sticking out of the leg went straight into the man's temple, and he died on the spot. The mistress came home with groceries to find my dad standing there in a daze, and her brother collapsed on the floor. My dad was sentenced to death. The mistress was so devastated by her brother's death that she took the child and left with nothing. I inherited all of my dad's money. I kept enough for my living expenses and college tuition and donated the rest to the village elementary school. When I went to college, Lena moved her shop to the city and even bought a small apartment. The thought of being able to live with Lena filled me with a deep, quiet happiness. When we went shopping, people would hear me call her mom and be amazed. "Wow, you look so young to have a daughter that big." Lena was only 16 years older than me, and her round face made her look even younger. I thought about it and said to her one evening, maybe we should just call each other sisters. Lena was at her work table and making clothes. Hearing this, she picked up a ruler as if to tap me on the head. But I had my arguments ready. "Hey, big sister," I said. "What's so great about being a mom? Once you're a mom, everyone thinks you're supposed to cook and clean for your kid, and they forget you need time to have fun too. It's like once a woman becomes a mom, she turns into another kind of creature. Her own desires, her hobbies, she has to put them all away. She's just a mom and nothing else." Lena put down what she was doing and listened with a smile as I continued. "Being sisters is much more equal. You look out for me and I look out for you. Neither of us has to sacrifice ourselves for the other." I concluded, you could call it after many years the stepmom became a sister. After that, Lena let me call her sister all day long. One day, my sister asked me, "What's the character for a door with a line through it?" I said, "That's for latch. How do you not know that word?" She just smiled and didn't say anything. It suddenly hit me, and I jumped up. "Lena, you can't read. You checked my homework for all those years, and it turns out you can't even read." This woman was truly incredible. She sighed. Who would believe a woman my age is illiterate? But I was helping raise my younger brother since I was 3 or 4, cutting grass for the pigs. One time, I was washing clothes by the river, and my brother fell in. I was terrified and pulled him out right away. But when we got home, he let it slip, and my dad dragged me back to the river and almost drowned me. He thought I did it on purpose. With a family like that, I never saw the inside of a school for a single day. "It's okay," I said firmly. "I'll teach you." I bought first-grade textbooks and taught her how to write, character by character. Lena was a good student, patiently practicing her strokes in the workbook, writing 200 characters a day without fail. Later, I enrolled her in continuing education classes for seniors. Lena was shocked. I've never even set foot in an elementary school. I was packing her school bag nearby and said, "Classmate Lena, from now on, you're not allowed to sleep until you finish your homework, okay?" With her skilled hands, Lena could replicate any knitting or crochet pattern just by looking at it once, which amazed all the other women in her class. There was no shortage of single men pursuing her. One would bring her flowers, another would bring her breakfast, and one older man would send her voice messages every few days, singing her a song. I felt a surge of insecurity and asked her plaintively, "You're not going to run off with some strange man one day and leave me without even saying goodbye, are you?" Lena cut off a voice message, silencing the man mid-song. Then she stretched out comfortably on the sofa and yawned. Just as I thought she had fallen asleep, Lena said in the most loving tone I had ever heard, "Of course not, you silly girl.